Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to Silmi Laws on Facebook Live. And today we are going to have another very empowering session, of course, with the one and only guru when it comes to everything about U.S. immigration. Round of applause, please, for the one and only attorney Sharif Silmi. Hi, Sharif.
Hi, Mary. How are you? Thank you so much. I appreciate you. How are you doing?
I'm feeling great and excited to learn, about our session today. I did invite
Cool.
some of my friends and family to tune in, and they're also very, very curious. So I think, let's just dive in. And
Great.
definitely to everybody who's tuned in, I think they can also type in their comments or their questions. So we'll be happy to answer if ever there's some time. So, Attorney Sharif, so this our topic today, of course, as what everybody can see, is EB1A visa hacks with Chat GPT. So how, okay? How does one leverage Chat GPT for compelling petition materials, and then later on maybe you'll explain the limitations and how far that we can, the extent of being able to use and maximize Chat GPT, especially for EB1A.
Sure. I think that it's quite clear that ChatGPT is something that is gaining a lot of traction with folks out there, particularly individuals who are relatively sophisticated in use of technology and such that they know how the technology can be useful and helpful to them. And I think it's actually quite amazing and a really great tool if you're able to leverage it in the proper way. One thing that I have found over the past decade, at least, is that there's always a difficult, or folks often have a difficult time preparing testimonial statements and letters, and where a individual is seeking a particular immigration outcome. And, we're thinking about self-petition scenarios such as EB1A, obviously, and ChatGPT. We just got a drop-in visitor, one of our friends there. But so when we're looking at the, EB1A or national interest waiver, I think the use of the sort of, text generating technology that ChatGPT provides can really help with folks like overcoming writer's block and getting past the problems that they might have. I mean, I think that one thing that we do with our or have done over many years is we provide folks with samples of letters and testimony that would be acceptable and consistent with winning cases. And I think when you take some of that documentation and maybe use a generative text tool like ChatGPT, it can be quite useful and helpful in producing the kind of testimony that a witness can then provide. Now, it does sort of overgeneralize at times, and I think we can get to those limitations. But I think overall, it is quite useful and helpful. I mean, in terms of like you think about the legal process of immigration, as attorneys involved in assisting and preparing cases. I mean, we're never in the business of writing letters for clients. That's always like a line that we don't cross. But we do, I think, make suggestions and also sort of give feedback with respect to the testimonial statements that are produced and made by the individual providing it. So usually, we could think of a situation where somebody's getting a letter from a professor or their employer, and that individual is providing the letter. We would review it, give feedback and such. So it could take a really long time for people to come up with the right type of information. But I think that the generative text technology is sort of helping to expedite that process. And if you do it in the right way, I think it could be actually helpful. So I think I'm sort of on the side. Maybe I'm a outlier in this right now in my field in terms of attorneys, but I feel like we should embrace the technology to the extent that it could help us, while at the same time being careful and recognizing the limitations, that it does not interfere with what would otherwise be a useful and helpful case. So that's sort of like where I am with it. And in fact, I would probably be happy to maybe demonstrate some of these things for folks out there, even, on this call. So if you guys hang out for a little bit with us while we're kind of, answering some questions that have been asked already and are continue to be coming in, hopefully I'll have time to kind of go through a little bit of what I've found with respect to the use of the tool.
Yes, that was I was gonna get into, like, people would want to see maybe a quick demonstration on, like, number one, how to start, and then you mentioned like limitations, right, and leveraging. So we'd like to talk deeply about that more. And then just one question. Well, I know about this already, but why don't attorneys draft the letters? Why shouldn't they, like, ethically, especially, why can't the attorneys initiate the drafting of the letters?
So technically you can. I mean, we can create letters, but we would have to speak to the individual who's providing the letter, and that's quite daunting and expensive. I mean, if you're thinking about it, like if, for example, one has a case and they have maybe 6 or 7 individuals who intend to provide, letters, or what I describe as testimony on behalf of an individual. If I am to prepare that document on behalf of the client, I would have to speak to that individual directly, whose testimony is being produced, in order to understand what they are trying to actually state, and then maybe I can help them craft that language. But we're not actually to just create evidence, and that would be unethical and beyond what I think any ethical attorney would want to do. So that's just important thing to know. And it's an important thing to be careful of when you're using a tool like ChatGPT. You don't want to just generate like obviously a fictional narrative, because honestly, those things are easy to spot. I mean, I've seen many people who have provided evidence through the use of, the generative text AI functionality, such as, what ChatGPT provides. And I think it's quite easy to spot. There are very consistent styles within the text that are, easy to get. And also, without sophisticated prompts, the text that is generated is actually pretty like ordinary, and lacks the extraordinary. Maybe somebody,
The verbiage, yeah.
we need to put the extra in extraordinary sometimes, and I don't think it's necessarily going to do that. It almost is kind of like a lowest common denominator of the kind of information or evidence that we would that we generally see. So I do see that as a limitation.
Okay, so I think, well, I myself too am eager and excited to see, so we can proceed with the demonstration. Attorney Sharif.
Okay, so before I get into the use of the actual tool, I want to just remind folks out there regarding the common mistakes that do take place with EB1A and national interest waiver recommendation letters. So if we could just bring that up on screen. So here we have, this was something that I put out almost a couple years ago now, and principle that we've been abiding by almost forever. And essentially what it says is that many petitions to classify a person with extraordinary ability contain recommendation letters of support. Now, letters of support, while not without weight, should not form the cornerstone of a successful petition. So if your plan as an individual seeking to apply for EB1A or national interest waiver is to produce a bunch of letters from people that and thinking that that's going to somehow result in you acquiring EB1A or national interest waiver for that matter, I think that is a misplaced expectation, and you're wasting your time and money. Rather, what you need to do is produce statements. You need to produce statements, or witnesses should produce statements that are corroborated by documentary evidence in the record. So letters they ought to be testimonial in nature, meaning they need to be intended as truthful statements made to a government official, and the kind of just make a recommendation letter, for the purposes of EB1A prompt is not going to result in anything that would be useful for an actual approval. So the letters should explain in specific terms why the witness believes the beneficiary and their contributions to be of great significance. Again, I will repeat that. Why? It's not that they believe, it's why they believe it. So, for example, often the first thing that a letter will state is, this letter is provided in support of Mary, who is an individual of extraordinary ability. That is not the way to start a letter, because first of all, your personal opinion that she qualifies for the classification is irrelevant. It is the USCIS adjudicator who will decide whether or not the individual qualifies for the classification.
Okay.
So why are we starting a letter like that in the first instance? That's one thing. Then what we want to do is explain in specific terms, why does the witness believe the beneficiary and their contribution to be of great significance? Or for the individual to be of a caliber of a person who has extraordinary ability. Not that they believe he has extraordinary ability or she has extraordinary ability, but why do they believe it, right?
Okay.
Letters, this is the most important, I think, sentence that I can repeat. Letters that merely reiterate USCIS's definitions relating to the classification, i.e., letters that keep repeating words like exceptional, significant, outstanding, of major significance, extraordinary, those are called general and expansive statements. They are not persuasive. They are not persuasive. So if you get a letter that says, Mary has made significant contributions to the field and has, through her extraordinary ability and blah, 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 this is worthless. Absolutely and totally worthless. It's not going to actually help. Now, what will help, right? What will help is that you have a letter that explains in specific terms why the witnesses believe that you have extraordinary ability, right? Why? What are the specific reasons? And letters must be credible. The relationship, the affiliation between the beneficiary and the witness is a factor that USCIS will consider. So if you're getting a letter from someone who you've worked with in the past, or that you currently work with, or somebody that you studied with, that is not going to be persuasive. In fact, the number one reason that I've seen cases denied in, and I would say otherwise approvable cases denied, is because all of the evidence or testimony was provided by folks who are within the circle of professional acquaintances. And that is a huge mistake. So you cannot provide evidence from that particular circle of professional acquaintances. And it goes on. And I would say that one of the most important things here, a successful petition consists of extensive documentary evidence that is contemporary to the applicant's contributions. So letters themselves cannot get you approved. I want to be very clear about this. You need to provide documented evidence that is contemporaneous with the contribution that you have made in order to prove the case. The letters can put things in a context, they can explain things, but they cannot, result in an approval. The most common thing I see from people who come to me after having filed a case with, either their company or individually with another attorney, is that they have maybe 7 or 8 mini biographies about themselves. I mean, like, you don't need a mini biography written by 7 different people that say the same thing. That's not going to add value to your case. A self petition is like a puzzle. And a puzzle is made up of different kinds of pieces. And every different kind of piece has a different picture or component or purpose to it. So do not have the idea that you need the same thing to be repeated by 5 or 10 different people. That is, for lack of a better term, rubbish. So regardless of what the tools that are available, I think it's really, really important for you to have the right guidance, support, and subject your materials to proper review before you actually put them forward. And that's definitely something that we could do within a working session, to actually, review materials. And of course, folks who do come on board where we are preparing the case and submitting it won't have that problem, because obviously we're going to vet and make sure that everything is done properly from the outset. One thing I would say is, with regard to scheduling a consultation, you can schedule a consultation if you have interest in us, helping you out. Obviously, if you're new and you just want to learn about the situation that you're in and would like an analysis and examination of your case, and whether it meets the criteria or classification, or could meet it, then perhaps a 30-minute would be sufficient. If you want a more in-depth analysis, you can look at a 60-minute. Now, for those of you who are already working on a case, maybe through your company or through a different attorney, or even doing it without representation, I have added recently working sessions where I will roll up my sleeves and actually engage in the material with you. And that is now available, that you can either contact us at info@silmilaw.com or book it on our website at silmilaw.com. So,
Attorney
having
Sri,
said,
oh, sorry, for the third session, like, because I've received like a couple of questions about it. What's the difference between a 30-minute consultation versus a working session? Does this include like RFE? Number one, for example, some people who filed it themselves, usually they find themselves faced with an RFE. And number two, letters. Will you be able to help them like finish several letters when they book a working schedule with you?
yeah, I mean, a working session, whatever they want us to do within the time frame that we've allocated, we will do it. I mean, whether that means reviewing an RFE with you and coming up with strategies to respond to it, reviewing your actual testimonial evidence and other documented evidence, we're happy to do that. We're happy to just like engage with you in whatever way that you see fit. One of the things that we do is, when you actually book the working session, you want to provide us your goals for the call, so that we can make sure we go into it prepared and hitting the ground runnings to make the best use of the time. So that's sort of what we'd like to do with when it comes to the working session. All right. So looking at the actual situation with regard to the chat GPT, and here I'm using the GPT-4 model. And look, there should be no stigma related or attached to the use of AI generative text for the purpose of, if you're using it in the right way. I mean, if you're using it in a way that you're making up fake narratives, obviously that's unethical. And whether you're, I mean, if you hire a story writer to create a bunch of fiction, that's also unethical. So I don't think that the tool itself poses any ethical issues for those who want to utilize it. But if you're doing it in a way that is, kind of like just producing fake documentation, then obviously that's going to be a big problem. So just a couple use cases with respect to ChatGPT. One of them I used here to essentially prepare instructions to join BCS IT Fellowship. So I've often, explained that BCS IT Fellowship is an organization that has actual pretty decent requirements within their bylaws and constitution. And we've done past, sessions on membership and how to prove it. So it's not just about acquiring the membership, but it's also about how you demonstrate the proof of acquiring the membership based upon outstanding contributions to your field. But here, what I've done is I've just asked for help to, develop or create the, instructions to join, BCS IT fellowship, right? So here you find that, it talks about the cutoff of knowledge, but it actually goes in and, provides instructions where it says, here are the general steps to apply for fellowship with BCS. Check if you're eligible, prepare the evidence, get the references, complete the application, submit the application, and also tells you that in some cases you would be subject to an interview. Now, here's the thing. I mean, this could probably have been done even better through Google, because you would have been able to pull out the actual instructions from the organization. And if you follow the instructions that the organization provides, and they, for example, do not, honor those instructions, you could hold them accountable. But if you follow these instructions and you submit the documentation accordingly and say, hey, and they come back with you and say you did not follow the proper directions, I mean, you're not going to tell them, well, I checked with AI and it told me to do, in this particular way.
Mhm.
And, because obviously, I mean, it tells you itself, it has an information cutoff date, things could
Yeah.
change, right?
Mhm.
And also it's rather general. It doesn't really dig in enough. And like how you actually qualify for BCS IT fellowship is really like an art that goes beyond what this is kind of spitting out in a
Mhm.
sense. And I mean, I don't have time to go into it, but one thing that I would kind of offer as a critique with respect to the ChatGPT tool is that it seems more scientific than artistic in a way. And I think that, a lot of the way that one can, develop an EB1A case would be more of an artistic endeavor than a scientific endeavor, meaning that you need to kind of be a little bit creative and putting together the picture rather than just follow specific instructions. Because frankly speaking, many people who are seeking EB1A are in situations where they are not yet extraordinary. I mean, they're essentially ordinary IT level, maybe higher level workers. And we're trying to figure out, how do we make you fit what is an extremely high classification standard, right? And we have to mold you in such a way that would, make that case work, such that you would be at the very highest level of your field. So just like something that does a good job of putting out materials, editing content, producing language is not going to necessarily, overcome those obstacles. So for example, here, so I created like a fictional kind of, narrative regarding the, case, right? So what I did was I asked it to please prepare a letter on behalf of a CTO of Acme, right? Such that it reflects Deepak Shankar, so it's obviously a fictional name, is the chief technical architect solutions engineer, and he's a leading expert in database migration for this corporation. And he delivered Acme's first. So I'm giving it very specific prompts, right? I'm telling them that essentially he is an expert in database migration, right? So we had already, you could think of this as we've already defined our field as being involved in database migration, and that essentially he is responsible for this company's first ever data migration from a local server to a cloud-based server, and essentially that he thus fulfills a role that has proved essential to the operation of the company and to some of the most important technological innovations the company has made in the past several years, right? So, and that text was basically taken from a sample document that I had. So we use that as the prompt, right? And here it puts out a letter, it structures it, and it, so I never told the ChatGPT that this is a letter that's intended for USCIS or for adjudication of an EB1A case, right? Essentially what I did is I just told it that, we want to, essentially prepare a letter on behalf of the CTO stating what we had mentioned. And I think it does a decent job, although again, it is very kind of, for lack of a better term, robotic. I mean, it says I'm writing on behalf of Acme as a leading authority in database migration. I say Mr. Shankar is, has a unique blend of skills. I mean, this is relatively superfluous. The migration project, complex as it was, not only demonstrated his exceptional technical proficiency, but also his leadership. And so having exceptional technical, here's a problem, right? If you don't spot issues. Exceptional ability is a standard for EB2 based casework. Literally, that's in the statute. If you possess exceptional ability, then that's an EB2 level worker. Extraordinary ability is a completely different standard. So if you had a letter that said, so-and-so possesses exceptional ability, and you submit it within the context of an EB1A, that is a red flag right there. And an adjudicator can pull that as a basis to, deny your case by saying your own people are saying that you have exceptional ability. While that is noteworthy, while that's wonderful, it does not translate into extraordinary ability. So that's very problematic. And then he goes on to say that, this migration project, so his understanding of technical business aspects, and then it's important to emphasize the significance of the milestone, which revolutionized our data management and scale. So it gives you a little bit of structure, but it lacks specificity, right? So you really need to feed it a lot more material in order for it to get more specific and avoid these pitfalls. Now, so it goes on, right? And essentially, what I instructed it to do is I said, rewrite the letter and this time target it for USCIS adjudication under EB1A classification. I think that the letter actually gets a little bit worse. So here it says, I write in my capacity of Chief Technical Officer of Acme, expressing unequivocal support for Deepak's EB1A petition. So why is that a problem? Let's look back at our mistakes to avoid, right? What does it say here? And this is 100% based on case precedents, on adjudication manual, on all of the legal knowledge that we have and know to be true. So even though I instructed it to prepare it for an EB1A petition, it made a huge legal blunder. And right here, it'll tell you letters must be credible. The relationship or affiliation between the beneficiary and the witness is a factor USCIS will consider when weighing the witness's testimony, and it's expected that one whose accomplishments have garnered sustained acclaim would have received recognition for their accomplishments well beyond the circle of professional acquaintances. So the fact that our letter is actually stating that here that he is essentially unequivocally supporting his EB1A means that this person has zero credibility and that they're essentially cheerleaders for the individual rather than providing objective testimony based on personal knowledge. So and then it goes on and it says his groundbreaking work has been instrumental in technological transformation. He's led the initiative to migrate our data from local services to cloud-based services, et cetera, et cetera. Nothing too spectacular here. The achievement has revolutionized our data management. How has it revolutionized? So it's saying what it did, but it didn't say how it did it. I always like to think about like the baseball tonight analysis, meaning if you ever watch ESPN, right? So if you watch Sports Center on ESPN, then they'll talk about like, okay, here are the highlights of the game. Here's who won. Here's who lost. Maybe, talk about it for a little bit, how wonderful the pitcher did, who had the best, opportunities at the batter's box, etc. Right? But if you watch Baseball Tonight, which is a show that's specifically about baseball, then it talks about how the pitcher was holding the ball, what the velocity of the speed was, the curve that went in or did not go in. It goes into the details of the details of the details, right? So we need Baseball Tonight. We don't need Sports Center. And then, so the achievement is revolutionized, blah, blah, blah. His role at Acme extends beyond isolated projects. It's worth emphasizing. Now, here's the thing. The CTO, who is within the same organization, emphasizing that the beneficiary is among the small percentage of individuals in our field who have risen to the top of their profession, is not going to fly with the adjudicator. You've already said that you're unequivocally in support of his case. So why would the CTO concluding that you're at the top percentage of your field somehow be beneficial to your case? It would not be. Again, mistakes to avoid. That's one of the mistakes. So in light of the aforementioned contribution and achievements, I strongly believe, blah, 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 we wholeheartedly support his case. I mean, I think I would call this a relatively weak letter. However, it does create a much better, maybe draft kind of possible case where we could start to really get into the specifics, right? And then maybe correct the language, do a lot of things. So you would probably have to go into maybe, and I've tried this, maybe another 10 or 15 prompts to correct before you start getting into language that would be actually useful for a case, where you'll start telling it to change things, add these specifics, but you got to know what to tell it, obviously, right? So that's obvious, something that maybe we can do in a working session if the witness is available or able to provide those specifics. Now, what I did here was I thought interesting. I asked it to rewrite once more in light of the guidelines from the blog that I had written, which were the mistakes to avoid in, preparing an EB1A case. So when we did that, it produced a much improved letter. And so here it says, I'm writing this letter, my role as CTO, to provide a testimonial for Mr. Shankar. And it says, over the years, I observed his work closely and can speak with authority on his professional expertise and the significance of his much better, much better. I wouldn't say, so I think this is great. This is very much acceptable and a really nice opening, paragraph. Now, it goes into a little bit more of the specifics of the transfer. Obviously, it didn't have that much data to use. So if you feed it more data, it's going to get more into the specifics. And then, it talks about the magnitude of the work, beyond his work. This is what, it has done in terms of how it gained recognition outside of. So, like the mistakes to avoid piece talks about how you need to gain recognition outside of your circle. Now, a letter from your own employer stating that you have gained, recognition outside of your circle is not really the way that you're going to prove that you have, that's not the best evidence. So there's much better evidence that you could use for that purpose. And the good thing here is that it says that it's important to note that his contributions and wider technology are not incidental. His work demonstrated, substantial. Okay, to further substantiate my testimonial, I have included accolades and recognitions Mr. Shankar has received from industry bodies, a list of patents he holds, and examples of his work being cited by peers and other industry stakeholders. So I guess where that were to actually, if you actually have documented evidence and you'd probably want to describe it and state that it's included is probably useful. And there is one other part that I noticed here. In conclusion, while the letter provides an overview, okay, it's the attached documentary evidence that truly validates his eligibility for the EB1A classification. His sustained record of achievements he's received from outside pressure circle, far-reaching impact. Thank you. So see how it really, accepted the prompts that I gave it and, kind of included it into the letter. I thought that was an improvement, but I think this still needs many, many more prompts to get it to where it needs to go. It almost takes as much time as reviewing a letter and making the changes directly, or even more time. And I think the end result is just about similar. And so I thought this was a little through substantial accomplishments. And, so I thought this was much better and, helpful to the overall situation. I would also just point really quick to one other thing is that, so I asked, just generally, how does one go about proving that they have met the requirements of reviewing and judging the work of others, just to see what it would do? And it was way off. I mean, it was not even close. It talked about compile your credentials, gather relevant documentation such as degrees and certificates, show professional experience, highlight your achievements, obtain recommendation letters. I mean, show impact. And so I thought this was way off. And
Very generic,
so I think from a very generic and it's not even accurate. So I'm not sure what, so I talked to people who are in the large language modeling, development world. And, they're saying that it does have a little bit of difficulty with context. So I think that could be part of what's going on here. Now it does write well, generates amazing text. I mean, for sure, like it's already writing, better than most people. And I think that is, quite useful in terms of its writing ability, but, really giving it the right and specific prompts is the most important thing. And then I even tried it where we said, develop a case strategy to acquire EB1A approval for Deepak Shankar, our friend who has worked, and we just said for the state of Maryland, just, again, this is all fictional, for 10 years as a database migration engineer, and he's responsible for migration of a driver database, right? And it didn't do well. I mean, again, it's very general. So it talks about EB1A, talks about, we'll have to illustrate that he's one of those few individuals that have risen to the very top. And then it just tells you, gather evidence of recognition and outstanding achievements. And it says, we'll need to show evidence of Deepak's significant contributions to the field of database migration. This can be in the form of patents. What if I don't have patents? Of published articles? What if I don't have? What if we don't have awards? Membership. So it's, and letters of recommendation he has received. That's just, you could find that on any attorney's website or any even, USCIS website. I don't think this is anything useful here. So I don't think this is really going to help much in terms of, but it does help, I think, with folks, and you could stop sharing now. I do think that it does help with respect to individuals who have a hard time preparing statements on behalf of witnesses. But again, you have to do so many re-prompting exercises with it. And you really have to know what it is what is the end result supposed to look like, right? So that obviously is going to need, knowledge. Otherwise, you're just going to waste your time and effort. And sometimes, that could be detrimental to the outcome of your case.
And I just wanted to say that it still cannot replace Attorney Sharif Silmi, especially when it comes to winning your EB1A petition. But it does help, like what Attorney Sharif said a while ago, putting together, whether it's an NIW or an EB1A, it's like a puzzle. So it does address one part of the puzzle, just one part of it, which is, of course, the letters. But I think you will still need to depend on a great law firm, an excellent attorney who has compassion and, of course, the ability to really win for you, such as Attorney Sharif Silmi, to help you put together the rest of the puzzle.
Thank you for that. I think, also, like I mentioned earlier, we don't really create letters, right? So this could definitely help the client create that, evidentiary record in a sense. So, as long as they're prompting it with the facts that they could corroborate and back up with existing documentation, it is certainly helpful for that purpose. And I've also found that it's a really wonderful tool to translate language. The translation functionality of it is amazing. So I think that there are quite a lot of uses for it, and I do think that from a I guess your EB1A hack perspective,
Mm-hmm.
those who are unable to get past developing testimonial content, this is a wonderful tool that could kind of get things rolling for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
All
so
right.
we've gone over time, but I hope that we were able to address some of the questions that many of our friends and, of course, those who've inquired just for today have. And anything else you'd like to share, Attorney Sharif?
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate you and appreciate everybody out there and your ongoing and continuing support. And hopefully we'll meet again soon.
Yes, and you guys know how to contact us. That's silmilaw.com, and email us, and the phone number's right there. Thank you so much, and until our next Silmi Live session. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much,
Thank
Attorney
you.
Sharif.
Thanks, Mary.